what could be more dangerous to Jewish people right now than lumping us all in with this genocidal campaign of the Israeli government? We want a world where perpetrators of war crimes are held accountable. We want a world in which all people can live safely in their homes. That is both because of the lessons that we've taken from our own history and because of the world that we are fighting for today, that we want for all people, not just for Jews.
Welcome to the Big Picture podcast. My name is Mohammed Hassan, and today we sit down with Jewish American activist Simone Zimmerman. Zimmerman is the co-founder of If Not Now, a grassroots organization fighting to end the U.S. Jewish community's support for Israel's occupation of Gaza and the West Bank. Her experience challenging her beliefs about Israel and Zionism are documented in a powerful new film called Israelism.
I don't think I realized the extent to which what I would come to see on the ground would really shock me and horrify me. You are a self-loathing Jew. Go kill yourself. An anti-Semitic Jew.
The way that we talk about anti-Semitism isn't about protecting Jews, it's about protecting Israel. How dangerous is that?
Since October 7 and the start of the war in Gaza, hundreds of rallies have been led by Jewish Americans protesting Israel's actions, some risking arrest or their careers, others being attacked and shunned by their own communities who questioned their very identity as Jews. Despite the intense criticism, many of these voices have only grown bolder, signaling what could be a generational shift in the way many young Jews see Israel, and the way many young Americans see their government's relationship with it. Welcome to the Big Picture. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I want to talk to you about this film, this great film, Israelism. I want to talk to you about your own journey, your own activism, and how everything is seen in the context of what's been happening over the last 6 months. But let's start with you. You are somebody who has become something of a public face for a generation of young Jewish Americans who are publicly questioning, critiquing Israel and Zionism. When you were a teenager, and we talk about some of your experiences in the film, did you ever imagine that you'd be where you are today?
I mean, well, I was definitely raised to think that I would be a Jewish leader of some kind. Unfortunately for many of the people who gave me that message, they're probably not so happy with the type of leader I became. But
it's not quite how they imagined.
Yeah, but it's definitely, I'm jumping the gun here a little bit, but I think one of the jokes that we make, but it's actually quite serious, and a lot of the Jewish left organizing that I'm part of, is that many of us have become people who have taken on the type of leadership, who are, so devoted to our communities, who are working like tirelessly to build, a Jewish life and a Jewish community that aligns with our values, which is actually exactly what so many of us were raised to want to do. But unfortunately for the old guard of our community, we're not doing it with the same political commitments or positions that they perhaps wanted us to take. And that's one of the kind of great ironies of some of this work, because there's a lot of panic in the American Jewish community about assimilation, about young Jews staying involved and connected to the community. And some of the most effective work to keep young Jews engaged in Jewish life is actually left-wing anti-occupation, anti-apartheid organizing.
Tell me more about that, because I've heard you describe the work that you do and the way that you see it as a continuation of a lineage of a fight for justice. So how do you see that, and how do you see the way that the role that you're playing right now fit into something that is much greater, much older?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's always important for me to say that even though we're in a moment of like tremendous revival and incredible, such a groundswell, right, of growth of support for the movement for ceasefire, against Israeli apartheid within the Jewish community, these are not new ideas. These are streams of thought and of activism that have always existed in Jewish communities. There have always been Jews who have dissented against Zionism. These debates have been very aggressively quashed and, pushed out of the center of kind of like mainstream Jewish conversations, but they've always been there. There have always been Jewish people who have been, attacked as traitors to the community for dissenting against this position over many, many decades. And so there's a lot of ways in which right now I see the organizing, with groups like If Not Now and Jewish Voice for Peace and Na'amod here in the UK, that we are all very much like working in a lineage that already exists, and also, as I was just saying before, actually living out values that many of us were raised in, whether it's, a tradition of critical inquiry and open debate. The reason that there are so many young Jews fighting for Palestinian freedom is because we read the news and we see the horrors that are being committed against Palestinians, and we're asking questions about the mythologies that we were raised with, and also just like asking questions, in the same way that other young people around the world are asking. This is just like, but doing so out of like coming from having been raised to ask questions, to want to learn, to want to seek, deeper meanings and answers. And also, for many of us, it's also because of the Holocaust education that we were raised with, learning about our own community's history of, dehumanization and discrimination and violence and displacement. And we see echoes of things that we have been taught to oppose our entire lives happening in Gaza right now. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. It doesn't have to be direct comparisons. We can still know dehumanization when we see it. We can oppose state violence when we see it being committed on our phone screens every day. And those things for me are deeply Jewish values.
One of the really powerful things that this film does well, and part of it, through your own voice and your own journey, is that it explains the relationship that a lot of young Jews have with Israel, a lot of young Jewish Americans have with Israel, and that growing up there is an intricable link that you feel with the state of Israel, and you feel like you are a part of this project. What does that feel like when you're a young Jewish American being taught about what Israel is and why you should believe in this project?
Yeah, I mean, we're taught to see it as a home away from home, as a safe haven that we can always go to if something, goes wrong. We're taught to, many of us grow up in communities where Jews are a minority, and, going to a place in which, your religious symbols and traditions are visible and public, and where they are the hegemony. That's something that, is very meaningful for a young person to get to see and connect with. Of course, as soon as you begin to learn what the cost is, right, of the engineering of that space, to have Jewishness be in a supremacist role, and that has all been created at the expense of another society and is maintained by keeping Palestinians, by dispossessing Palestinians, expelling them, dehumanizing them, erasing them from that physical space and from the narrative of that space. It's obviously something that very quickly shatters the worldview that we were raised with. But yeah, it's a really nice story to be raised with the idea that your people have been persecuted for thousands of years, and now there's this redemption story that, after being persecuted for all this time, you can have this safe haven and you can have this heroic ending story where, your people have triumphed over history. But of course, no history is that simple and easy. And in a lot of ways, I see the kind of like undoing of the indoctrination that, I've had to go through and that many young Jews of my generation have had to go through. It's something that like people all over the world, have to face about the horrible histories in their own countries, and simplistic narratives that they might have been raised with that actually ignore and erase deep injustice and oppression.